to episode 59 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 18th of March 2019. I'm Joe, and with me are Phelim.
Good evening.
And Will.
Hello.
Yeah, no Graham. He decided to pick the most exciting Brexit-based political week to go to Europe, funnily enough. So, yes, we won't be hearing from him. We'll have an interview later on about Maru OS, which is the exciting Lineage-based ROM that allows you to run Debian with Xfce. But first, let's do some news. And, what's this? I wonder who put this one in. It's the first Plasma mobile sprint.
Why, that must have been Graham. Surely it was not I.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the Plasma Mobile guys have got together and they have started concerted effort of getting the system usable. First couple of things were Angelfish, the browser. They've integrated that more with Kirigami, the application development framework that they have. And Kaiden, the XMPP messaging app, has also had some improvements done as well. They've been working on some of the build stuff that they've had issues with KDE Neon not fully working, but they've kind of got those straightened out, and the Flatpaks weren't compiling properly or whatever a Flatpak does when you build it together. But Harold Sitter from the KDE Neon project helped them out with that, so all good there. They're also joined by Dorata from Purism, who helped them by bringing along some kit for them to try out as well, and they have got those all running it as well, so it's quite good. So you actually have a proper OS running on them now, finally.
Yeah, none of that GNOME nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. And they now also have the PinePhone dev kit as well, so they're working on that too. So yeah, lots there. Yeah,
and also some RISC-V hardware as well, so they had a lot of hardware to work on. Are you sure this was the first Plasma mobile sprint? I swear they've done others.
I don't know. They claim they said the first, I think.
All right, fair enough. Well, either way, it's good to see some work being done, some like really positive work on it, because Plasma mobile is one of those weird things where they just have a very slow pace of development, don't they? It's sort of the kind of thing that seems to happen in people's spare time and just as and when. It's not like this fully fleshed out OS yet, and they're not claiming that it is, but it also doesn't seem to develop very quickly, does it?
It is slow development, but the thing is, they've also been working sort of parallel to this. So if you follow the weekly update blog by Nate in usability updates, and he has also been adding, like, just this week, both GwenView has had improvements to its touch interface, and Ocular has got decent navigation inputs for like going forward and backwards with your finger, so you can quickly tap through a document and stuff. And all that stuff just churns on in the background. So it's like a lot of these things are unseen until someone comes along in a sprint and then stitches them all together and you go, haha, here we go. And you have some massive progress made and it looks like nothing has happened up to that point. And yeah, no, I think as you say, they're honest about it. They're not trying to say it's the next greatest thing ever, but it could be, and it might happen sooner than we think.
Good stuff from Plasma Mobile. I do have high hopes for it. I do want it to succeed, because when we do finally get some properly free hardware, I think it's got the best chance of being a decent OS. But a little bit more news from the KDE camp. And this doesn't really affect us much, but Krita has got a version for Windows that has got support for HDR, which is pretty unusual.
Yeah, not the whatever that thing is that works on your phone, tone something or other, tone mapping, I think it is. Not that. It's high dynamic range, i.e. lots more colors, essentially. Unfortunately, the only OS that supports that right now is Windows 10. Not even the Mac and not even Linux supports it. So the interesting thing I found about that was they had to do a whole lot of kung fu to get, obviously Krita works with OpenGL. They had to have a translation year to get that to work with DirectX, and then they also had to get a layer on top of that to get Qt to not interfere with the buttons on the GUI, not messing up with the HDR image inside the editing panel, because Qt itself didn't support it either. So they had to make hacks to both of those two things to get it to work. And it was apparently several months' work, which it's interesting that they spent the time working on it. So they must have a reason. There must be some market out there, Windows users looking for a decent editor, and this seems to fit the bill. So it's quite interesting that way.
And support for HDR will be coming to Linux at some point. I know that they mentioned this in the article, actually, that Intel are working on HDR support for Linux right now. So hopefully we'll get it soon.
I hope so, but I'm not holding my breath. Maybe it'll come with Wayland.
Yeah, maybe. Well, speaking of Wayland, GNOME 3.32 has been released. And presumably this is going into 1904 then, Will?
It is. It is already there, in fact. Most of it is. And we'll be releasing the new suite of applications from 3.32 very soon. So if you're running 1804, for example, you'll be upgraded to the new applications where we're shipping those as snaps, so Calculator and System Monitor, for example. So yes, it will be coming in 1904. The main features for 3.32 are some relatively small changes to the way that Nightlight works. The on-screen keyboard's got emoji support. The Google Drive integration is much better. They've refreshed the icons. There's some new settings around app permissions, which will let you turn on and off things like notifications for specific applications, which is quite nice. But for me, the big two features are fractional scaling and the amazing performance increases that go into 3.32. The fractional scaling, I'm pleased to say, is something that Marco on the Ubuntu desktop team has been working on with Jonas upstream. So they landed that fairly late in the cycle, but it's in there now for Wayland. And so now if you've got displays of different resolutions, displays of different pixel density, then you can scale those two different screens independently of each other. You can scale now in measurements other than whole integers, so like 125%, for example, which is something that people have been asking for a long, long time. So I'm really glad that that's in there.
But if you're using X still, then you can go and fuck yourself if you're not getting that. It's Wayland only.
Well, watch this space. We want to get that feature landed for Ubuntu in 1904. So we're there now. There's a PPA if you want to test it. I'll share some updates on social media when it's ready to go. But yes, we certainly hope that it will be there in time for 1904.
What, for X as well as Wayland then?
For X, yes.
Oh, excellent. So you are shipping with X again then for 1904?
Yeah, so there's still, the same problems that we had in the first place. The things are being done to address those, but I still don't feel that we're quite all the way there yet. There's still work needed. So yeah, we're sticking with X for the time being.
Yeah, you've got 1910, I suppose, for your Wayland practice before 2004.
Yeah, absolutely. The other big one was performance increases. And reading around the web, lots of people have been saying that this is like a game changer, that it just feels so much faster. And I will put my voice behind those as well. When I installed it, 1904 fresh the other day from the daily ISO, it just flew along. It felt amazing, like it should have been, many, many years ago. So I would urge people to go and try the 1904 dailies, stick it on their laptop or in a VM and test it out. And I think you will see that the performance increases really do make the whole thing just fly along. And I'm also very pleased to say that Daniel from the desktop team has been working on that as well. So good work, guys.
I should point out that you can get this on Rawhide as well on Fedora if you hate Ubuntu.
Never heard of it.
But it does go to show that what we hoped would happen is happening. When Ubuntu adopted GNOME, or, went back to GNOME and fucked off Unity, we really hoped that you lot would be spending your time and money making GNOME better for everyone, because obviously it's going to be better in Ubuntu, but Fedora, Arch, whatever, it's going to benefit from all the work that you guys are doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, upstream is our primary target here. We, if we've got merge proposals, they all go upstream and they go into the review queue. We are free, of course, to distro patch things if we choose to. So if perhaps something hasn't been reviewed yet, or we think it's very, very important, then we can still put that in Ubuntu first, and we will do. But ultimately, everything will land in GNOME. So yeah, it's good for everybody.
It's not good for me. Is it still single threaded? It's just shit stirring. Ignore me.
Yeah, well, it does look like a solid release. I was too busy over the weekend to try it out, but I think I'm going to have to install the Ubuntu nightlies and or dailies, you call them, don't they?
Yeah.
And see what all the fuss is about. Okay, this episode is sponsored by DigitalOcean. Go to do.co/LNL. That's for Late Night Linux. And you can get $100 credit with 60 days to use it. DigitalOcean provide VMs, or droplets as they call them, in data centers all around the world with super fast networking and super fast SSDs. And I've been taking advantage of their services for many, many years now. I was recommending them long before they sponsored the show because it's just an excellent service. Over the years, they've added tons of new features. When they first started out, it was just the VMs with various Linux distros like Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, and CentOS. and even FreeBSD. And they've just added on top of that with container distros, loads of one-click apps like LAMP and LEMP stacks and WordPress and Discourse, great backups, cloud firewalls, which means that network traffic doesn't even reach your box if you don't want it to, block storage and object storage, which is really easy to set up, add to your droplet, add whichever kind of storage suits you best. They have a great Teams feature, which allows you to collaborate on projects together without having to give people your credentials. And what I really like about it is the scalability. You can start out from as little as $5 a month, but then you can scale up in increments to get exactly what you need. They offer CPU-optimized droplets if you need that extra power. So no matter what you want to do with Linux in a VM in a data center, you can do it with DigitalOcean. So go to do.co/LNL, get your $100 credit, get started. That's do.co/LNL. All right, well, let's move on to Debian then. And there's been a bit of drama over the last couple of weeks. It looked like they weren't going to get a leader because no one stepped forward for the elections. But now 5+ people, I don't know, it was 5 last time I looked, I don't know, at least 5 people, shall we say, have stepped forward for that. So that's all sorted. But that kind of came around the same time as Michael Stapleberg announced that he was stepping down from his involvement in the Debian project. And in a fairly decent way, not just sort of rage quitting or anything, but spelling out why he wasn't interested in being part of it anymore. And I suppose the TLDR is that it's all just a bit old and shit, all the infrastructure, and he's just had enough of it. I mean, Will, you are sort of piggybacking on top of Debian to a large extent, but you have very different ways of doing things, which are more modern. So, I mean, you must sort of identify with quite a lot of what he's saying.
Yeah. So to summarize then, I think, well, first of all, he said that the reason that he's stepping back is because of a lack of spare time. And that is increasingly common, right? We talked about this a few times in the past where people start working on a project or they start their own project and then suddenly it becomes this massive amount of work and they find it eating into their real lives, as it were. And ultimately people are stepping down, stepping away, and then fresh people will come along. But he has said, first and foremost, it's a lack of spare time that's causing him to step away. But then he does go into some of his frustrations that he's had with the Debian project over the years. And I guess now seemed like a good time to air his dirty laundry, if you will. To summarize some of the things he said, he said that the linting that goes on in the packages themselves is a lot of red tape and slows things down. And he feels that the teams who are responsible for those packages should have the power to change them in the way that they see fit. That change is too hard generally, that if you want to get a change to a package, then you open a bug, you put a patch in that bug, you ask for a review, and then it sits there forever because everybody else working on the project is also doing it in their spare time and they're busy, and there's no sort of deadlines around when these pieces of code need to be reviewed by. And so, yeah, things drag on, which I think is fairly common across a lot of open source projects.
But Debian is a very important project. It's one of the most important distros, arguably. And so if other people are feeling the same way about it, then we should do something, or they should do something about it, surely, because otherwise it sounds like it's not going to be great in the very long term for Debian.
Well, that being said, John Gorson, another Debian developer, chimed in with his, as he calls it, a partial defense of Debian. And he would say that, yes, definitely, there's a strong maintainer problem that Michael was talking about, where it seems that a package can have one sort of chief who runs it, and, it's very difficult to affect the development of that project or pushing out new changes to it, etc. And that is something that does need to be changed, where the teams would be a better way of managing these things, and documentation is not always a strong point where, there's multiple ways to do things and which one's the correct one. There needs to be some clear cut, maybe examples of building packages and the like. But he says you also don't need to be a Debian developer to actually contribute to the package. So that's not really a correct statement or a correct way to angle it, where, anybody can apply for a patch to be uploaded and get someone else to sponsor it, for instance. But he would also take an argument that the fact that, Michael seemed to be saying that, we should have a web form, the way GitHub works. You can log in, make a change, all these sort of things, whereas report bugs is old. But John would say, I can just open up my email, make a patch and email it, and everything else is contained within email. That's a good record, and it means I don't have to open up a browser. Things like report bugs. Also, you can pull in a whole load of information when you say, oh, I've just had a bug in that package. So, report bug package name, bang, it hauls in all the info from your machine. You don't get that in a web form. You lose all those sort of things because it's a disconnected sort of tool. So I think there's two sides to it, as always, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that generally, though, community involvement in open source projects has changed from the view 10 years ago where people who were contributing code and expertise. And these days, I think people who are contributing are more drive-by fixes. They'll find a bug in something and they'll want to open a bug. So they'll go to the bug track in Debian and then lose the will to live and not bother. Whereas if they can just bash that into a web form, then they're more likely to submit that information. The problem then, of course, is that bug information actually of any use? If you can't contact the person who opened the bug in the first place, if you've got no logs about what went on, is there any value in that bug? That I think that's a different problem. I think the first thing needs to be acknowledged is that community participation has changed, and the Debian project or Ubuntu or any project needs to change with the way that people work on the internet these days and the web.
Yeah, email. Who the fuck uses that anymore? Well, me every day and all of us every day. But there's at least a perception that people have moved on to more modern things, Discord, Slack, Telegram, whatever it is. And email is just this sort of antiquated thing. I mean, it's funny, like, again, a total tangent here. I was thinking about how we've moved away from the web to this app-based use of the internet, which uses a lot of web technologies. But like thinking about my brother's kids or whatever, and then running into nasty shit on the internet is like much less likely now because they don't really use the web much. I don't suppose they open the browser much. They're opening Instagram, they're opening YouTube as apps on their phone or whatever. And, that's sort of an extreme one end of it. But the reality is that if all of your infrastructure is based around ancient technologies like email, it's going to put off new people. I'm sure there's plenty of existing people who are perfectly happy with that workflow and some new people who would adapt to it. But the reality is that that's not how things work now. And if Debian doesn't modernize, then I'm not saying it's going to be a problem in the next 6 months, a year, or whatever, but I think, in 20 more years, then everyone who's working on it is going to fucking snuff it.
Just to throw in another counterexample to that, though, was on Linux Weekly News. The Open Mandriva developers talked, Neil Gumpa, I think his name is, was talking about the fact that they gave up on Discourse because they found that it was just too demanding. It was higher and it was harder to maintain, and developers just gave up eventually because they were just getting bombarded with stuff. And they switched back to IRC and I guess email as well, because it was getting to the point where there was this supposedly instant active communication channel on Discourse and nobody from the development team was in it because they just couldn't hack it anymore. They said, no, we're just not being in there.
I did see that article, but I wasn't clear what they were using Discourse for. What was the goal here? To use it as a bug tracker or just a sort of chat?
I think it was a combination between chat between users, developers, and a lot. And I just think it was just too much. Because, I find that in work as well. If I'm working on a problem right then and there, something that, it's an instant chat, is perfectly fine. That's exactly what you want because you say, try it now. Okay, it's working. Great. But imagine thousands of people bombarding that thing constantly. It'd be like trying to drink from a fire hose, as the saying goes.
Well, I tend to disagree with that because we relaunched the Ubuntu desktop mailing list as a Discourse topic or thread forum thing. And we were very clear that when we did that, we weren't there to offer end user support. And we've got some incredibly dedicated admins who take care of telling people the right resources to go to if they need help. But what we started doing was posting our weekly updates to Discourse instead of posting it to an IRC meeting. And we've seen thousands and thousands of people read that weekly update, and we've seen news articles generated from that content that we just weren't getting before. So my experience says it's not that bad, and you do reach a lot more people that way.
Well, just last episode, we were talking about how the KDE project was modernizing onto Matrix. And the good thing about that is that it can tie in legacy systems like IRC.
I've been sitting in that watching as people go, oh, the fucking bridge has crashed again. Blah, blah, blah.
Well, that's just technical problems that can be fixed, to be fair. But without modernization, you don't get new blood. And, I'm supposed to be this Luddite, but I do understand that people don't want to just use the same old shit. I mean, I do. I'm using Xfce for fuck's sake. But most people like new shiny things and want to go to the newest, latest platform, whatever it is. And, maybe before when I said 20 years that all have snuffed it, that might have been a bit ridiculous. But you need to think of the future. And if you're stuck using systems that are this old already and feel outdated now, how outdated are they going to feel in 20 years or 50 years or 100 years? If we haven't wiped ourselves out in a nuclear apocalypse, we need to actually think about the long-term future of this stuff.
And I would say that's why Debian is doing exactly that. Stability. No newfangled stuff until they're really sure it's right.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, if we haven't killed ourselves in 100 years, then email will almost certainly still be around in some form, whereas all these other things, maybe not. On to a bit of admin then. And first of all, thank you everyone for supporting us on PayPal and Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It continues to tick up every month. If you want to join them, go to latenightlinux.com/support. And if you get on Patreon and support us for $5 or more, you can get an advert-free RSS feed. So do check that out. If you want to get in contact, latenightlinux.com/contact. And just a quick mention of the Ubuntu podcast get-together that happened at the weekend. It's very good fun. I met some listeners of both shows, even though surely everyone only listens to ours, but there you go. And got fairly drunk and chatted to WinPress until 4:30 in the morning, and then got woken up with some bastards drumming outside my hotel room, which was not much fun. But the whole thing was great, and yeah, it was great to meet everyone. So thanks for coming if you did. Okay, this episode is sponsored by CDN77. Go to cdn77.com, and they are a UK-based CDN provider with a standalone live streaming platform providing end-to-end video solutions. They sponsor loads of great projects like CentOS, KDE, Fedora, Gentoo, and Funtoo. And one of their standout clients is the European Space Agency, who use CDN77 to deliver Hubble images all around the world. And this CDN is built from over 500 servers, all running Debian, and most of them are physical servers, only a few of them are VMs. And everything is developed in-house by CDN77. They make their own DDoS protection, and through the optimizations that they've done, they can push 80 gigabits per second of live streaming through just one machine. They've got 30 points of presence in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia, with daily peaks regularly exceeding 4 terabits per second. They're really big on innovation as well. They were the first CDN to implement features like HTTP2 and Brockley compression. But most importantly, it's really easy to use. I hosted an episode of the Joe Rest podcast on there, and it was really easy to put the file on there and link to it. And I've had no complaints about the speed from people downloading it all over the world. They've recently launched some new monthly plans with the best value on the market from $9.99 per terabytes as a global flat rate. And they've also got a pay-as-you-go option with no commitments and full transparency. They've got a 14-day trial with no credit card needed, so go to cdn77.com and sign up there. And once you've done your free trial and you're ready to go for the paid option, then mention Late Night Linux to the sales or tech support team, and you get an extra first payment bonus. So, for example, if you topped up $1,000, you'd get an extra $400 on top of that. So go to cdn77.com, sign up, and start delivering new content. Right, so we've got an interview now, as mentioned at the beginning, and that is with Preetam D'Souza, and it's about Maru OS and their recent 0.6 release. And I think we go into mostly what it's about during the interview. But one thing that was not mentioned was, apart from moving over to Lineage as the base for this version rather than AOSP, it's also now based on Debian 9. And so, yeah, we should have probably mentioned that. But otherwise, yes, let's hear that now. Welcome back to the show, Preetam.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So I suppose we should get out of the way, first of all, for people who didn't hear you last time. What exactly is Maru OS?
Sure, yeah. I used to have other ways of explaining what Maru is, but I think the simplest way to explain it is it's an open operating system that makes it a joy to use your phone as your PC. And the way we do that, it's kind of a unique spin on what other companies are doing. But what we do is that we run Android and Linux simultaneously on your device. So all you need to do is hook up to an external display, and we spin up full-fledged Debian Linux, and you can go ahead and get real productivity done on your phone. And at the same time, you can use Android on your device, both screens running independently of each other.
And most importantly, this is Debian with Xfce, so it keeps me happy.
Xfce, correct.
Yeah. And so what's the underlying technology here to make this work? Because it's sharing the Android kernel, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, that's right. So to keep things snappy and performant, we are sharing the same Linux kernel, and we're doing that through the use of Linux containers. So I ported Linux containers over to Android, so we're like legitimately spinning up a true LXC container on your phone.
Nice.
But this used to be based on just the Android open source project, but now recently for this 0.6 release, you've moved over to Lineage. Is that right?
That's correct. I just had a blog post published recently with the 0.6 release that came out just last week, talking about our move from the Android open source project to Lineage OS. And there were some key reasons for doing that. The most important of them was probably the fact that Lineage OS offers a lot broader device support than the Android open source project. For people who have been following along with our project previously, you must have noticed that we only support the Nexus 5 and the Nexus 7 2013, which are pretty old devices right now. So, I saw that as a huge bottleneck to the velocity of the project. So we were trying to figure out ways, hey, how can we get Maru out on more devices? And probably one of the lowest hanging fruits for us was probably to switch to Lineage OS and leverage all of the great device support in that ecosystem. So we made that move in our last release.
So how easy is it to port the Maru stuff over to an existing Lineage ROM? Because Lineage is supported on tons of devices, right? So it's going to make it easier, but how easy is it going to make it?
A lot easier because, as I said previously, with vanilla Android open source project, it only comes with support out of the box for the Nexus devices and the Google devices like Pixel, etc. But with Lineage OS, we can just go ahead and build right on top of the device code that the Lineage community has built. So it should make it quite a bit easier. To give you an idea, I was just playing around with getting something going for, what was it? I think one of our community members had a port going for the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus. It's not official yet, but it's on the forums and stuff. And he was able to get it working fairly quickly as soon as we switched over to Lineage. Actually, what was going on was that people who wanted to port it to non-Nexus and Google devices, what they were doing was they were actually using Lineage OS source code, the device code, and they were going ahead and cherry picking all of the changes that Maru made to Android open source project and porting it over to Lineage OS themselves, just because it was such a pain in the ass to get the device code working on the raw Android open source project. So our porters ended up doing that anyway. So I was like, you know what? May as well make this official and just switch branches over to Lineage OS so that they don't need to do this anymore.
I actually prefer Lineage anyway. It's got more features than just straight up AOSP.
Okay, well, that's good then.
Yeah, so it suits me. It'd be good if you could do a port for the OnePlus 3T, because me and Phelim, he's not here now, but he's also on the show, we've both got that phone, so it'd be great if we could get that. But obviously it needs some devs to do that.
That's right. I believe there was a request for the 3T, if I remember correctly. 3T and the 5T as well, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're both, or maybe it's the 5 and the 3T are quite well supported by Lineage. So
okay. Yeah,
that'd be good. Mm-hmm. So how likely would it be to be able to get something a bit heavier weight than Xfce running then, Preetam?
Very, very possible. So speaking of some of the ports in our developer group, we actually do have Ubuntu running on there. I think, was it 16.04 or was it 14.04? I can't remember exactly which one, but it definitely is running. It seems to be okay.
So that'll be Unity 7 then?
Yes, I believe so.
Nice.
Yes, I haven't actually tried it out myself, but from what people are saying, it's very, very much usable.
Awesome.
Because that's what you said last time, that because it's based on pretty standard technology with Linux containers, that it's really fairly straightforward to port any Linux to it. You could get Arch or anything running, right?
Mm-hmm. It's exactly right. Since we use Linux containers, we leverage as much of the open source technology we can that's already written out there. So for Linux containers, when we build Debian, we try to leverage some of the LXC templates that they use themselves to build a Debian container. So, if anyone wants to build something, for example, Arch or Ubuntu, they can go ahead and get started with the LXC templates just because Maru is designed to work with containers produced from those templates. There are a few little things that need to be changed, of course, to make it work, but, we can get 70 to 80% of the way there just from the LXC templates themselves.
I was reading on your website, your recent blog post announcing 0.6 that you'd got Chromecast working. And I think that's an incredibly amazing feat of engineering to get that working. Is that made easier by using Lineage, or does it not really make any difference?
Yeah, great question, actually. It makes no difference at all whether it's AOSP or Lineage OS to get Chromecast working, actually. In fact, we had Chromecast working when we were still on AOSP.
Nice. Because for me, the biggest problem with the whole your phone is your PC is that you need there to be a keyboard and a mouse, certainly, but also a screen to be wherever it is you take your phone to. Mm-hmm. And certainly in the Ubuntu and Android days, that was the biggest complaint that people had, was that you can't necessarily get rid of your laptop in this situation. Whereas I can see for people who are giving presentations, they could go into an office or, wherever it is they're doing their presentation, connect up wirelessly to the projector, assuming it supports Chromecast or indeed Miracast, which you've got working as well, mm-hmm. And then just project directly to it and use the phone as an input device. That's a killer feature for me. So, yeah, good work.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I knew that was the killer feature. It's been a feature request for quite a while, but it took some time to get right. But I think we're pretty happy with how it's working right now. People are trying it on all sorts of devices. Someone just posted recently in our user forum. He was using the Nexus 5 and streaming wirelessly to his NVIDIA Shield. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So how's the latency on that? You see, I didn't get a chance to try it out, unfortunately. I did get a chance with my Slimport cable with my Nexus 5, mm-hmm. but I haven't got a Chromecast or any sort of Miracast or anything. And that would be the one thing I'd be looking for, because if the latency is too high, then it's going to make it a bit of an unpleasant experience.
That's right. So that was my initial concern with wireless as well. And one of the reasons I was putting it off, I was thinking, hey, there's got to be a decent amount of latency here. I don't know if the experience will be good. But I decided to give it a try anyway. And, with the early experiments on Chromecast, we're pretty surprised. I mean, when you first start it up, you can see that latency. But over time, it actually gets quite good. The compression on Chromecast nowadays is very good. And so it's noticeable if you're used to an actual wired connection. It absolutely is noticeable, but a lot less noticeable than I thought.
Presumably it depends on the Wi-Fi that you've got. If you've got proper AC and 5 gigahertz, then it's going to be much better.
Absolutely. But it's very, very usable. I mean, I don't think people are using Maru to play, real-time games or anything like that. But we're not there yet, I think. But for everyday office kind of tasks, for development, it's absolutely perfect and very, very usable.
One thing that I noticed didn't work was sound. Is there any chance of getting that actually working?
Yeah, we really need to get audio working. We have a prototype of audio working, actually. It just hasn't been merged in yet. We have it working through Pulse Audio. And I think the Galaxy S9 port I was talking about previously, the S9 Plus port, that actually has audio built in. And so I think that has been our test bed for audio. I need to go in and, tidy everything up, get it merged in, have it pass QA, and then make it happen. But for sure, it's on the horizon.
And has the Dex stuff had any influence on this, or is that just completely separate and proprietary and horrible?
Well, it is completely separate. Hasn't really influenced anything that we've done. I mean, since they have the Dex Pad now for the S9 Plus, again, that's one of the reasons why we were experimenting on the Galaxy itself. We actually had Maru working on the Galaxy S9 Plus, like very early version of it, working before Samsung itself had their Dex project out. Because we just wanted to see what it could do. And the hardware is super powerful. The Dex Pad works well with our port so far, but there's still a few things we need to tighten up before it's released.
And so what are people actually using this for? I mean, I've used it for testing and stuff, but the Nexus 5 that I've got has got a cracked screen, and it's just it's not powerful enough to be my daily driver phone. But are people just testing at this point, or is anyone actually using it to get work done?
There are definitely a lot of people testing it. However, there are also a lot of people who are in the same position like you. They have these old phones lying around the house that they can install Maru on. Let's take an old Nexus 5, and they just hook it up to an external display permanently, and they have a little, at-home PC, basically. So people are using it for that. There are people using it as their daily drivers as well, though. Because people have been asking me about the Nexus 5 and all these little issues related to calling. So clearly they've been using it as their main phone. Even the Nexus 5, which is quite old.
Well, my wife uses a Nexus 5. And I keep telling her she should upgrade it, but she said, oh, it's fine. It's doing the job. So
that's right.
It is still a great phone. It was an amazing phone when it came out all those years ago. And, I suppose people just get into the habit of upgrading their phone all the time. But the reality is, if you replace the battery in it, the Nexus 5 is actually, with Lineage, especially if you don't flash the Google stuff, it's actually a very usable phone still.
Absolutely, yeah. As soon as you flash the Google stuff, it really slows down quite a bit.
Yeah, and kills your battery life and stuff as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's one issue with this, is that you can't use it with the screen off still. I remember last time we spoke, that was something you talked about being a very difficult problem, because when you turn the screen off on an Android device, it just sort of makes the whole thing go to sleep. Is there any progress on that then?
It's pretty much at the same state it was before, which is, you should ideally keep it connected to power. And then the phone should go into daydream, kind of like a screensaver mode, while your desktop is still active. So that's kind of the state we're at right now, unfortunately. You can't completely turn off the phone, because it just shuts down the whole thing, the whole display controller and everything. Yeah,
but you can keep the desktop running in the background, can't you, with the screen off?
Yes. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
And I mean, there's been a couple of cool improvements actually that came in 0.6, dealing tangentially with some of these things. For example, we now, when we do wireless, right? For wireless, there was an issue previously where using Bluetooth keyboard and mice while in wireless mode, it wouldn't detect the key presses, because we were reserving those input events for the desktop and not on Android. So Android's screen would shut down unless you had it connected to power. So your desktop also would shut down unless you turned on like keep screen awake or something. But now we've actually had some changes in the input stack so that your key presses and your mouse movements are also registered on Android. So Android says, hey, you're using me, and stays awake and all of those things.
Are you aware of KDE Connect? I'm
aware of it, but I haven't messed with it myself, no.
Because that is an amazing project, and there's GS Connect, which is the sort of GNOME version of it. And that allows you to use your phone as an input device. And so it would be really cool. That's something I wish I'd tried actually now. It'd be cool to use the phone as a touchpad and keyboard. And then you wouldn't need any, if you had a Chromecast and your phone, then you wouldn't need any other peripherals, potentially.
Yeah, that would be a killer feature. You're right. We should definitely look into that. At least for sure, as a trackpad, it makes total sense. And the on-screen keyboard, could be used as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish I'd tested that. I'll have to test that after we finish talking, and hopefully report on it in the show.
Yeah, you know what? Now that you mention it, I thought there was some app that you could download from the Play Store where you can use your mouse like that. It sets itself up almost like a like a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse or something like that.
Yeah, that might well be KDE Connect or GS Connect.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what it was. And I believe someone was messing with it on Maru, and I believe it worked. But you should definitely try it out.
Yeah, we'll do. Because, I mean, that's the beauty of it. You've got a proper Linux system there. I mean, the only other problem is that shared kernel, which means that things like snaps don't work. You don't have those modern features because a device like the Nexus 5 has got this ancient 3-point-something kernel.
Yeah, 3.4, yeah, very old.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's just not much you can do about that, is there?
Yeah, not much at all. There's no way you're taking the Nexus 5 to a more modern kernel than the 3.4. It's too much work.
That's ARM development for you.
Yeah.
So if people want to download this and try it out, do you have a sort of minimum spec of a phone that that you would recommend people don't go below to get a good experience?
Yeah. Again, people are using this on a Nexus 5, which is pretty old. But I would argue the experience is definitely usable on Nexus 5, but not the best experience. But for example, on the Nexus 5X, which is just one generation afterwards, I'd say the experience is very, very much usable. So as long as you have anything at that level or beyond around the Nexus 5X or Nexus 6P, the experience is very good because Xfce is so lightweight. So
what's in the future of the project then?
Some of the things I'd like to see happen, of course, I've been saying this even last time I was on the project, but it's improved device support. And again, we moved to Lineage OS, so that should be a lot more possible, a lot easier for our developers. Second thing is, again, we have Ubuntu working, so that for sure should be a possibility as well. I'd like to see alternate desktop distros. There are a few things I want to do for that, actually. Right now, you can only use Debian, but I'd like to make it possible to have an app on your phone, like kind of like a setup wizard. When you boot your phone for the first time running Maru, it gives you an option of, hey, you can install this desktop or that desktop. So some better management panels and features like that to make it a joy to use, as well as audio, as you mentioned before. And then, of course, there's always hardware acceleration, which which everyone has been asking for. But it's really the devil's really in the details there. So that's something I'd like to look into as well.
That sounds like it might be a bit far off then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not easy to do.
Well, I think that's what's good about the project is that you're honest. You're calling it 0.6. You're not calling it version 6 or whatever. You're not trying to claim that this is some finished product that's ready for mass market. It's something that's very much a work in progress.
That's right. Absolutely.
I mean, would that be the ultimate dream, though, to get it on some OEM devices sort of pre-installed?
Yeah, I mean, that'd be great. I'd love that. If we support audio and we have some, at least, basic form of hardware acceleration working, that would be pretty great to have Maru on an OEM device. And I'd be happy to announce 1.0 if we get there. Yeah.
And I see you've now got a Patreon set up to try and kind of assist financially with the development of the project.
That's right. So with 0.6, wanted to actually a lot of people have been emailing me and asking if they could donate to the project and support. And I always said, hey, I don't take donations or anything like that. But I thought I'd give it a shot. Maybe we could try some other routes for funding. And so I created a Patreon page. I haven't actually announced that publicly or anything. I just hooked it up onto the website. Probably make an announcement regarding that a bit later. But yes, you can support the project on Patreon. I also give people an option when they're downloading the software to decide to pay for Maru if you want. You can pay $0 if you want. It's going to be free. It's been free since it's been out in 2016 and will continue to be so. But if you would like to pay for Maru because it has some value to you, you can go ahead and do that. There's an option right on the download page.
Yeah, it looks very much like the elementary OS download page to me.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. Pay what you want. If you're in a position to pay, then every dollar helps the project.
And presumably the biggest thing you want is devs to port this to other devices then.
That's exactly right.
Well, hopefully there'll be some listening who will do that. Because I would love to see this project grow and become, because this is the version of Convergence that I had always envisaged. This idea of I don't know. There's various versions of Convergence anyway. Let's not shit on other projects, but this to me like a proper Android experience, and then switched over to a proper Linux experience with a folder that you can have on the desktop that shares the data back and forth between them. It just seems like the right approach to me, and I'm surprised that you've not had more people jump on board and grow it to a bigger project, really. And I really hope that you will get there. Like now you switch to Lineage and that you potentially got all these new devices. I really hope that happens and you end up growing this and it becomes like a proper usable daily driver thing. And if it was available for the 3T, I'd basically be using it now, I think.
All right. Well, then we're going to have to support the 3T.
Yeah. So if people want to find out about it, then where's the best place to go?
Yeah, MaruOS.com, MaruOS.com. Check it out. We got, you can check out, download it for your phone and get up and running in no time. We have a link to the documentation right there. It's a very simple install guide. It's about 10 to 12 steps. You should be up and running in about 5 to 10 minutes.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'd like to commend you trying to push the old 1+3T there. I would very much like them to have that because I really would like to try this because it does sound pretty damn cool.
You can't get Plasma running though, unfortunately, so you'd be stuck with Xfce.
I take it all back. I don't want to touch it. No, it would be good because, I mean, it's a really interesting idea where you can have essentially two devices in one and an actual a useful sort of both of them. It's different than all the other types of convergence that are knocking around. Well, except maybe the Samsung one. But I mean, let's face it, Samsung just copied this anyway with Dex, didn't they?
Obviously, yeah. But yeah, exactly. It's not trying to sort of shoehorn one thing into the other. It's just using existing open source technologies to give you a solid phone OS and a solid desktop OS that can just run concurrently. And the Chromecast stuff, as you flagged up there, Will, that is really important, I think, to not have to piss around with cables and everything. If you've got a Chromecast, you've got some sort of Bluetooth keyboard and mouse, you're just off to the races without anything.
Yeah, I see this being huge for people that turn up to do talks at, technical conferences and meetups and that kind of thing. You could just take your phone and, if the hardware supports Chromecast, or stick a Chromecast in your pocket, whatever, and you're good to go, and you don't have to take a laptop with you. And, there must be thousands of people who are looking for exactly that thing.
Yeah, well, I'm really hoping, as I said in the interview, that it'll get ported to tons more devices and that you'll get an OEM deal and it'll just really take off, because I've been wanting this for so long, ever since I heard about Convergence with Ubuntu. And I thought, I don't like that aspect of it. I don't like that aspect of it. Then I heard about Maru and I was like, that is exactly what I want in Convergence. So yeah, here's hoping. Right, well, we better get out of here then. But we'll be back in a couple of weeks when hopefully Graham will be back.
Not with all broken limbs.
Yes, hopefully he didn't fall off his snowboard too often. But yes, until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelan.
And I've been Will.
See you later.